Hi, welcome. On this video I'm going to be discussing remote callers and the role that they play within the framework of the relational model and um, where the place they fall within the scripting process. Now, when it comes to remote callers, they have a place within the relational model, but it's important to understand that it's all about the owner changing. It's all about promoting change. And it's all about right relationship and proper relational alignment with that device. Now here, this diagram, what it shows is how this all connects, how this relational process connects with each other through the various dynamics in play, including the owner and the dog, environment, other people, and even within the context of devices, which is the focus of this video as it relates to the remote caller. Now, here you can kind of look at this as all kind of like cogs that turn, but they all need to turn in a right relationship in accordance to change happening in and through the owner. That's really important to understand. Otherwise, if one wheel is turning too slow, if one wheel is turning too fast, then you're going to have a disconnect at some level. It's not going to line up. It's really going to have an impact on the dog and on your goals, what your goals are. Now here when it comes to remote callers, they are used within the relational scripting, but it's about making sure that they follow the proper parameters of that script. And I'll use them within the context of interrupting very high levels of aggression, these highly expressive states which need to be pushed back at a certain level. However, when they are utilized, it's done very much within the scripting itself, so the person's coming online properly, and I'll use them within the scripting of inside the crate itself. When the dog is inside the crate and showing a lot of aggression towards other people nearby, I'll use those to interrupt those states. So it's about interrupting those states, but again, it's not about focusing just on that, using the remote collar in a way that's unhealthy, that's meant to just assert a high level of influence, because again, it's about it making sense to the dog. This needs to line up. So really within this model, they really fade in the background. They're used only for very specific purpose, and if they're used properly, they only need to be used in a very short duration to interrupt highly charged states. But again, when they are used even within that context, it's making sure it's lining up so that it's not putting stress undue stress onto the dog. Okay, that's very important. So here, to really see remote callers, how they work within the script, is to understand about promoting change in and through the person. So it's about changing how people think, how they connect, and then the actual methods themselves with the interactions, about the role that influence plays. Now I define influence as relational influence versus corrective. So the type of influence that comes online through this relational model, it's very much about scripting. It's about interrupting certain states, but in a way that you don't wait until the mind goes into a highly elevated state. Okay, it's understanding the focus needs to be on the level of separation. Okay, just as the mind starts to separate, and this is where people who use this scripting are being brought in tune to a certain way of understanding. You're looking at everything through the relational lens. So this issue of fade out, or the level you're being objectified, you're starting to, what you do is you're connecting these dots with the states of mind of the dog and behavior itself, how those represent highly elevated states. But then you're also looking at this issue of getting in tune to at the level of separation. So therefore, a look just isn't a look. It's the dog is starting to seek out and look for fulfillment. So the mind's starting to separate. It connects. The dog's connecting in very unhealthy ways. So what you're doing is you're interrupting these states. And this is where the communication part of this comes online. So when you look at communication influence as communication and the building blocks of change as what I define as follower moments, the type of influence, okay, you talk about relational influence, it needs to vary, okay? It will vary, a lot. It might be subtle, very subtle. So the type of influence, the changes of the levels are such that the remote collar is not an effective way of communication for scripting this in the way that it needs to happen through proper alignment. So all these wheels are turning properly, and there's no disconnect happening. So when you're working this with the communication, it's all about communicating effectively, but also the issue of promoting change in and through the person. The other issue is when you're using a tool and it's about connection, when you're connecting through a leash, when the person is actually moving the leash a certain way, or bringing influence online, what it does through the right type of connection, a hardwired type of connection, what it does is it promotes change through changing how the person thinks. So it moves their tachometer over, because you cannot move the leash a certain way and it not change how you think. However, when it comes to remote collar, that's problematic, because what you're doing is you're pushing a button and it is bringing influence online. However, the scripting is such that there can be problems there in terms of how this lines up with it making sense to the dog, how the dog connects this to the person. Generally, if someone's using a remote collar, their thinking is going to be changing anyway. They're using that device, so they're coming into a agreement with the device, and so their thinking is going to become more focused, more assertive. So it is going to line up to a certain level. However, again, getting into the communication part of this, we want to make sure we're communicating in a way that's very much in tune to the script. And the remote collar removes that ability to change that around at that level, and also to really communicate in a way that you're really feeling the level of separation. Because when the leash is connected and the dog's head's moving, you actually are able to respond. Okay, you're not just looking at the observable. There's little subtle things happening in the line of communication that you want to stick to. You want to stick to leash and just what I promote is a flat collar. Because what you're doing is you're investing the whole person, mind and body, into that. So here the issue too becomes one of control versus change. Oftentimes what happens is if there's a disconnect, if you're not connecting at a certain level the right way, what can happen is there can be what I define as device awareness. The dog will at the physical level come into alignment, so you get a picture of change at a certain level, but the dog's just responding to the influence of that device, but this isn't lining up to the person actually changing. The dog actually knows the real deal, because you have to understand something. Dogs really understand how they connect this together. It's relational. So if a device doesn't line up, it doesn't make sense, or there's a bit of a disconnect between the influence coming off that device and how the person thinks, there can be a problem, and that's where you get the stress. You can get stress levels. I've seen it with dogs with these remote collars, and I've actually had to remove the remote collar, because the thing is, when you're using a device such as that, it's really almost non-relational in a way, because you're not really assessing or considering what that influence is doing at a certain level. It can become a problem, because it becomes part of almost ego. That's why people get really can really rely off that device and really get to an unhealthy communication level with the dog. Here, if you strip everything away and just go to a leash and a flat collar, everything will line up better, and make sure that you have change happening versus control or a disconnect at a certain level. So anyway, just something to think about when you're using remote collars. They're a relational tool. They need to follow the scripting process, and how they're used within this model is they're used in a very specific way but they fade away very quickly. They're used to interrupt high states in the crate, because clearly I need a certain level of influence inside the crate because I can't get in there that way. But again, it's even when you're using it within that, it's all about making sure this is lining up properly as well. You want to be careful when you're using a device to make sure that it's actually aligning properly with the person promoting change. It makes sense to the dog. If so you have to be very careful when you use certain things, because you want the transition process to be smooth, less stress on the dog as possible, and for everything to come into right relationship. But anyway, if you're interested in understanding more about this model, I show what training is. It's an intervention. So all this comes together. Everything connects this way through everything, including devices. But if you're interested to find out more, you can go to my website, www.k9pack.com. It's right here. And I have guides available, method guides available on my site. Beyond the Leash, that is the foundational method guide. It has all the techniques that I talk about on my videos. And then the actual one that goes along with that, Mind and Body Kinetics, it gets into this type of, it goes a little deeper, explains influence, and it gets into kind of like the behind the scenes of the relational model itself. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me anytime. I'd be more than happy to help you out.